As your attack surface stretches from the data center to the cloud and the device edge, security teams need visibility across it all to confidently detect and respond to threats. Experience frictionless hybrid security that helps you stop breaches 84% faster with ExtraHop's Reveal X360, the first and only SaaS-delivered network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/extrahop. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. That's right. We've got shows. If you want a whole show on compliance, you want a whole show for CISOs, we have all of those, several shows on the network. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher, subscribe to our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, and join our Discord server, all at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Also, if you missed Security Weekly Unlocked, whether you registered or not, you can visit securityweekly.com/unlocked and gain access to all of that amazing content. And now we have a lot of news to talk about. I think we should start with maybe some funding and/or acquisition. I like, Adrian, you followed suit. I tried to denote whether the story was funding or acquisition. I do want some more features that we can actually apply tags. I just did it in the title because we've got so many stories to cover. It's nice to know which ones are funding.
Makes it quick and easy to spot those.
Yeah,
where you don't have to read the whole entry to figure out what it is.
So I guess acquisition first.
Sure.
Dropbox to acquire a secure document startup called DocSend for a nominal fee of $165 million.
Yeah, for Dropbox, that's pretty nominal,
it's
right?
A baby one,
right? That's a big baby.
Yeah, they're big boys these days. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense for Dropbox.
Yeah, so slightly snarky comment in my notes here. Probably trying to compete more closely with Box here. Who's always been decided to go the more enterprise focused route. But of course that's where the money is for Box as well. But also maybe convince some Accellion customers to bring themselves into the 21st century.
Right.
After some issues. With some legacy Accellion products we saw people have. Yeah,
there was some drama there. Choose your technology, but you may have adopted something like Accellion long before there were other more modern options. And as we know, migrating products is hard. And a lot of, Qualys had to come out with official statements. We covered that last week on PSW. You do your due diligence, but again, it's a supply chain attack at the end of the day.
Back when I was working at a pen testing firm, guess what we used to deliver pen test reports to customers?
Accellion.
Yep. That company's gone now, so I can say that. I'm sure.
Yeah,
what they've been acquired into is using something else these days, I'm sure.
Right.
I wonder if this is going to have any impact on DocuSign in their market, right? Because if they connect DocSend, HelloSign, and Dropbox, it could be a reasonable competitor to DocuSign.
DocuSign does not just signature now; it does full document management of sharing of the
storage,
storage
distribution, right? Which is, I think, the play that Dropbox is taking a shot at here. DocuSign's a publicly traded company that's doing fairly well, so it's going to be interesting to see how they can go at them here.
Cool.
Very interesting. I considered the DocuSign angle.
It's interesting. I read this as acquisition. I think it can also be displayed or taken as a merger. Okta basically swallowing up a competitor. So
that's a language that they use. They said joining forces. They didn't. Right. They didn't use the acquisition word.
Gotcha. So Okta and Auth0. Okta being single sign-on, Auth0 also having single sign-on capabilities, but more on the authentication side?
They have a pretty complete feature set of products and features on both sides. So they're almost 100% overlap from what I can tell.
Interesting.
But that said, where one is weak, the other is strong, and vice versa. So there is some definite rationale there. Yeah, I know Tyler has some opinions on this. I kind of saw it as like a T-Mobile Sprint merger, where it's as much about companies as it is about tech. But
I think it's closer to, for me, I think it's closer to Okta's more about identity and mapping like application as an identity and identity of a user. Auth0 is about the authentication underneath those identities and how they work. So I think there is some non-overlap components to it. But I do like your analogy about the telcos. I'll go so far as to say like it's Verizon and like a true consumer young one, like even a young T-Mobile, right? Kind of pulling together because they just have different angles. One's more consumer and one is more enterprise, businessy style mobile. And I think that's what you're seeing here. Not the exact same consumer versus enterprise, but identity versus authentication, which are, there's a subtle difference here. And I think they're both strong in their own area. And I think they complement well.
I'm curious how we're doing on the balance of larger security companies merging and consolidating versus new security companies coming on the market. I mean, are we seeing, last week we saw Thycotic and Centrify joining forces. This week we're seeing Okta. I mean, is that, Okta and Auth0, is that just coincidence, or are we going to start seeing this trend where there's going to be less security vendors, or is there enough new ones coming on the market where we're still going to...
The wheel is always turning, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something, 451, I often call it a luxury that I had to kind of look at the industry as a whole and play with some of those trends. And no, I think that wheel is just growing bigger, but, we're always going to see some of these big multi-billion-dollar deals and along with new ones coming in, sometimes attacking some of the same problems, but making it a little bit easier for customers to deploy it or to use it. They find a new angle or they find a pain point that's been created by some of the previous generation companies,
right?
And they alleviate that pain point.
Just look at the sizes of them. I think that's the key thing, right? So if we look at the old guard, and we can actually use this point to transition into the McAfee spinoff story.
Sure.
But if we look at some of the old guard, and it's all about the growth rate in the public markets now. It's not really about your valuation is not, in most stocks anyways, most high-tech stocks, directly attributable to your revenue. It's actually more about your trailing growth and how fast you can grow the company. So you get these outrageous multiples on the younger companies against more low, down-to-earth, more fundamental-driven multiples on the big companies. And so you're just seeing these outrageous valuations for small companies to merge together because the public markets will pay for it.
And the best indicator, Tyler, of growth is number of customers?
Not always. Usually it's pure revenue growth on quarter-over-quarter or year-over-year metrics in the public market. But in the private markets, pre-IPO and pre-liquidation event, like customer count is a big piece of it. Net revenue retention, meaning the ability to grow faster with your revenue for every dollar. This year, you get basically a land expand model on your customers, right? You grow them over time, and so those are kind of where the valuations are really coming on the back of now. And there are some like Snyk and others that were valued based on pure customer and eyeball count.
Sure.
But it's very rare in the private markets now to just value something off of the revenue. I mean, everybody's getting 100 to 150x trailing revenue on their private valuations.
Yeah, one of the dangerous things with the revenue approach is without the customer numbers, you don't know how vulnerable that revenue is. Like I've seen some cases where, if U.S. government, or a single vendor like Intel in some of these cases I've seen with some of these startups, represents like half or 60% of your revenue. and all of a sudden they jump ship. You don't have a very sticky product, and you've got a competitor they jump over to. It's not a very stable number to go off of. You need more than that. But yeah, it depends on the business model as well. Like if you're freemium, like you mentioned, Snyk, Dropbox is another one where they more readily use the customer numbers than the revenue numbers. When
forget about the profit numbers when you're talking about tech.
Profit? What's that?
Who needs profit?
Who needs profit? I was explaining that to one of my family members, right?
Plan.
That deals with small business. I'm like, yeah, that model works for small business. Yes, once you get into tech stocks, profit doesn't mean anything.
We've got decades to make a profit,
right?
Well, their argument though, I think, is valid if you think about it. Like if you think about the profit argument, if you have profits and you're showing profits, it means you're not investing in the growth of the business fast enough.
Right. Yep. That's in tech. Yes, that's a big thing. Yeah. Speaking
if
of
you're going after those crazy growth rates.
I can't even, I don't think I could recap off the top of my head the changes that McAfee's undergone in the past 20 years.
So
I don't think I'd want to.
Right? Yeah. It's like a painful story.
So Intel grabs them because they think, we can sell more CPUs and, like there's going to be this huge low-level hardware play, between the hardware vendor and a software vendor. Turns out not so much, so TPG spins them out, takes them public again, and this has all happened within the last decade, right? Like when did Intel
you started about 10 years ago. Yeah, you started about 10 years ago. Intel buys them, TPG spins them out public.
I don't even think it was 10 years ago that Intel bought them.
Then did they go back private after they went public?
Yeah, TPG took them, rolled them out, and Intel still had a stake in them. Mm-hmm. No, you're right. So August 2010 is when McAfee was acquired for $7.7 billion.
Wow.
So that's in 2010 money. They're worth a lot less now. Yeah, and then TPG took them private in a buyout leverage that was valued at $4.2 billion. And then they were taken public again, and now they're pulling a Symantec here and following suit there, rolling out the consumer piece from the enterprise piece.
Yeah, so they sold the enterprise piece for $4 billion?
I think it was less than that, wasn't it?
I thought I read $4 billion.
No, it was, you're right, $4 billion, but the multiple was something like little over 3 times.
And that's just on the enterprise. That's just on the enterprise, not the consumer version.
Yeah, so it was pretty small multiple. Tyler talking about multiples earlier being huge with some of these smaller companies.
Well, I mean, to use that as another transition, you can take that and look at the funding of Aqua.
Yep.
135 million on a $1 billion valuation. At 3x, they must have 300 million something in revenue right now, and we know that's not the case for Aqua, right? So I mean, it just goes to show you that these smaller privately held ones, it's all about their growth rate, right? The 100, 200, 300% year-over-year growth on meaningful numbers gets big investments.
Crazy,
right? Yep.
Yeah. So Aqua, what was Aqua's series?
That's got to be at least a C. That's a huge number.
100. They took 135 million.
E. Yeah, that is E as an elephant.
And the same thing with Snyk was a Series E.
Yeah, that just announced this morning, right?
Yeah.
So unicorns there. I mean, at that funding, you've got to be valued over $1 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were one flat, 135 million Series E for one flat.
There's got to be an exit in sight once you get to Series E, though. So,
you would hope
we'll see what happens there. Yeah. I mean, certainly in container security, serverless and all that, we're deep into acquisition territory. So, talking about that earlier, about the cycle, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
All the research I did at 451, I found the cycle was roughly about 4 years that you would see between a category becoming a thing, and you'd see 1 or 2 or maybe 3 startups come out of stealth, and then you'd see, maybe a dozen, a little less than a dozen pop up after that. And generally, about 4 years after that, something like 80% of that market has been, has been acquired.
Right.
Maybe sometimes you see one or two that'll go public. And I think we're still under 4 dozen in terms of security companies that are public companies. These days,
there can only be
depending on what you call a security company,
and there can only be one category king in any given category, if you subscribe to the play bigger theory, which many do.
Yeah, so I actually do, but I actually have a slightly different rule of thumb. I think all markets go to 3 players, and they run roughly around a 60, 30, and 10% ownership of the market, and you can call that a one king model, 60 being the king, right? For sure. Yeah. But then you've got a 30 that does well, a 10 that's probably a decent exit or slightly above break even, and then everybody else is irrelevant.
Right.
Yeah. AWS, Azure, GCP.
Yeah. There you go.
Qualys, Rapid7, Tenable. There's so many markets where we talk about the big 3 in that market.
Tyler's model holds up certainly in many categories. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to Adrian's point, they tend to run around in a 4 to 6, 4 to 7 year window, which actually directly fits with the VC model, which tends to run in 10-year funds, right? So after, as you start to approach the end of the fund, the pressure from the venture capitalists to get their money back, return it to their LPs is great enough that the exits have to occur whether the founders want to or not. And by the time they're 7, 8 years into it, 6, 7, 8 years into it, they don't own it anyways. The money guys do. And so then that's when the acquisitions occur and the market consolidates in that 5 to 7 year window.
I think as an enterprise consumer, so you're looking for solutions. I mean, how much does that matter? I think this conversation probably matters for if you want to be a startup in this space, have a really good advisor or set of advisors. Like Adrian and Tyler would be my advisors if I were to create a new startup, right? But if I'm working for an enterprise and I'm acquiring solutions, right? Like how much does this funding and category king play into it?
So I think it depends on what kind of a buyer you are, and I typically set that market, separate it into 2 groups. There's the early adopter market, where these are companies that are big enough and serious enough about security. Well, it's not necessarily being serious. They've got the luxury to test out tools. They've got the bandwidth and the people to do lots of POCs, like Netflix, Universal Music, Intel. When you talk to a lot of startups and they show their logo slide, you see the same logos on that slide almost every time. And, you learn after a while, okay, these aren't normal customers. These are either companies that are closely tied with one of your VCs, one of your lead VCs, because that's something you do when somebody invests in you. They go tell all their other portfolio companies and the big enterprises that they're friends with, okay, you're now going to be a YubiKey customer or an Okta customer or something like that. It's almost required, for them to use the portfolio company. So a little inside baseball there, but that's why you see some of these companies over and over. And a lot of these, like Netflix has tons of open source too. So they'll try the product out, but then they'll make that determination. Does it make sense for us to build our own, to continue using this commercial product or some kind of mix of both? But the nice thing is these early adopter enterprises are almost like advisors.
Yes, they're going to direct
startups,
and that's to everyone's advantage.
They're going to
direct
their product.
Yeah,
they're gonna test it out. They're going to give honest feedback, because if they do end up wanting to go with this commercial product, they want it to work really well for them.
Yep. Axonius? I think we covered them before.
We did, but what's new is we found out the number on how much YL made by selling their stake, which is a lot.
270 million.
270 million, and that is just one of their investments out of their third fund, which their third fund was 75 million. So 270, like they're made. But the interesting thing about cybersecurity focused VCs like YL and ForgePoint, I always want to say ForgeRock, ForgePoint. Forge Rock is different. But generally, these companies get a decent return on almost all their investments. They almost never lose on these, whereas like the traditional VC model is get 100x on one thing and a bunch of failures. So maybe 1 out of every 20 is a unicorn, make a ton of cash on it, and it's okay if 19 don't have good exits or have no exit at all. Just go out of business. But in security, it's possible to get decent returns on almost all your investments. Because we don't have the failure rate that the rest of the startup world does.
Interesting.
The security hit rate is definitely higher, especially if you're hooked into the Israeli network.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a function of them kind of feeding off of each other, and like you mentioned, the whole VC connection and portfolio companies definitely using each other, and it's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy that's really happening in Israel right now with a lot of the cybersecurity companies coming out of the IDF and that whole, that whole storyline that literally every single one of them has.
It's a very tightly, right? It's a very tight ecosystem. Yeah.
The interesting thing about this story, besides the, well, let's call it the home run on first exit for that fund, which, as Adrian rightfully said, they're made. They don't have to worry about it now.
And there's 6
everything
more
else
to go
is gravy. Everything else is gravy. But to me, what's interesting is why didn't they fund Axonius? Why would they pull their money out? And what they said in the article is that they're an early stage investor. We're going to let late stage investors take over this one. Why? And I don't think it's necessarily because they didn't have the money and capital to put in. I'm sure they could have found the capital to put in if they felt it was a strong story. But I'm wondering if this might signal the point at which we've hit the cap of those outrageous, they've gone plaid style valuations, right? Have we hit that cap?
Well, I think it's a different risk model. I think that's part of the getting people to invest in the funds. You're going to say, that this is the end of the market we're going after. We've established ourselves as early stage, as seed. I'm not going to pretend to really understand, the VC strategies, but certainly, I could see that you don't want to play both sides of that market. That it might make sense, and that's something that Weil does is they're very hands-on as far as a VC, the average VC goes. They do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, and it's the mentoring and coaching is very different once you get to Series C, D, E. You're bringing in, maybe a more experienced leadership team. You're starting to talk about IPO, talk about private equity exits and stuff like that. So they would have to specialize in more, I would think, to be able to cover both ends of it.
Yeah, I hear you. You definitely could be right, and that's the story they're putting out there. But I'll pour coffee into the rumor cup and just say I think there's more behind that than we're actually seeing.
And maybe one end of it is easier and more fun than the other. I could certainly see the early stage being a lot more enjoyable, and fun than the more late stage kinds of challenges that you run into.
It's different for sure.
There was also a plethora of product announcements to get through as well. I thought one that was interesting, AWS announced a new lower cost storage class for Amazon's Elastic file system, which I think is a really cool file system. And I think also kind of interesting to think about how much it does tie you to the AWS platform when you implement EFS. I've even implemented it in some of our applications, and it's really cool. But now they're saying, I don't pretend to understand all the nuances. One zone storage class provides single availability zone storage at 47% lower cost than existing multi-availability zone storage classes.
I think it's just the same thing. It's just keeping it in a single region, single zone.
Yep.
And not having the overhead costs of replicating it across zones, which might speed up your application if it's distributed multi-zone.
Gotcha.
Or have reasons for being across zone, which is pretty cool. I think it's a good way to drive costs down, assuming your application designed in a single zone style model.
Right. And sticks people in AWS. stickiness there, right?
Everything's sticky when you're developing in one of these platforms.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing either.
No, definitely not.
What else? All kinds of stuff. Just going. There's so many. Radware's new integrated application delivery protection. Radware has a product called Altion, and it does web application firewall, a bot manager, and an API protection service, all bundled into one.
And it does your dishes every night.
I thought that was an interesting feature set to have in one product. We get in these conversations where we're like, is it better to go to a single provider? Radware's got some huge customers too, and not huge customers as we talked about with the startup angle to it, but really big customers that are obviously demanding that they want everything in one platform, which is kind of interesting. Bitdefender. Oh, go ahead. Did you have a comment there, Tyler?
I don't, but I'm going to shift over one more. I'm going to jump before you get into Bitdefender. Yep. I wanted to bring up a loop back to last week's conversation about LastPass offering the flexibility to authenticate into the Vault and single sign-on apps now with SMS passcode, voice call, or YubiKey.
It's interesting,
exactly
right?
What we were talking about last week, something that centralizes your YubiKey.
Something that centralizes your YubiKey, but also their messaging on the fact that you can easily lose track of your second factor, regardless of what it is, whether it's a YubiKey, whether it's your phone. What they're saying is if you've got a desk landline, which is kind of, it's usually not a landline, it's usually VoIP. I can see this in a call center, right? Your call center phone is a VoIP phone that sits in your office and you're part of a call center and you're working from home, especially with the pandemic. They're saying that can be a second factor if you've lost your phone or lost your YubiKey. And I'm like, how many people would raise their hand if I said how many people have either lost their phone or lost their YubiKey in the past 20 years? I've done both multiple times.
But have you done both at the same time?
Hopefully, thankfully not. I have lost two phones, like literally like they fell out of my pocket somewhere and I went back and it's gone. Someone had scooped it up and you're immediately doing the remote wipe. Thankfully, thank God for remote wipe, right? Happening with an iPhone and an Android phone. And I think I've lost a YubiKey.
As long as they don't drop it in a Faraday bag or something, right?
Right. Yeah. You get concerned about who has actually picked up your phone. But I mean, again, how many of us have lost a phone before? Like it happens,
Yeah. Yeah. I literally during our last segment, during the AMAS segment, I was wanting to star that GitHub repo, and I was logging into GitHub, and it asked me for a security key. None of these worked.
Yeah, I don't know that I've lost one, right? But if you get too many, you're like, wait, which one did I configure for which service?
So I did have a solo key. My black solo key is the one I think I mentioned in a previous episode that the connector snapped off. Just from use, which is one of the big differences I hadn't really thought of between my YubiKeys and this one, the construction.
It fails. Yeah, it's a good point, Adrian.
These are surrounded by ABS plastic, so it's very, very difficult to snap off one of these, whereas this is just soldered on the board here. And but I was able to use TOTP token code instead, so I just did that. But at that point, you're like, well, why do I have the keys then?
Yeah, if you can just fall back. That's another thing too. Yeah, I think having good security on your fallbacks is I think what LastPass is trying to enable for enterprise, and certainly making the enterprise play is, they just decommissioned their free version, right? So now is it only, or they limited their free version more to drive people to pay it? I think is the case.
Yeah, I think it was just a lot more limited, but there still is a free version. But yeah, if something could tell me, and I try and do it in the title of my 1Password entry, like I try and have everything color coded, like I've got red, black, and blue here, and I try and put one of those colors in the title of my 1Password entry. But that's something I have to do manually.
Yep,
it would be nice if something else could tell me which one to use, so I'm not plugging in all three of these every time I have to use a security key.
Agreed. Bitdefender seems to, I feel like this is like a duplicate announcement. They're announcing a new cloud-based EDR solution. I feel like they've already announced this and they're like re-announcing it. And that's a thing, right? I think if you tend to like message on the same things, or maybe they made some improvements on it. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I don't recall them announcing this. You sure it wasn't Malwarebytes or one of the others?
Yeah, it was Bitdefender, although it does sound like, now that I read this again, that they're making a play in the MSSP space. So, deploy, get your own cloud instance, and then as an MSSP, you can use this for your customer kind of thing.
Right.
And I saw that also with Blue Mirror and Cerium. I've interviewed some folks from Blue Mirror before. I know some people that work there. And, their angle, speaking of Tyler, your 60-30-10 rule, right? Blue Mirror's angle on the SIM or security management, event management space is we want to make it just super easy for smaller businesses. And we're going to partner with MSSPs that are handling smaller businesses, and we want to be the play. And you can see it in their software because I saw the demo, right? It's lightweight, it's really super easy to use, and that's their focus. And I give them credit for that, right? You got to find a segment of the market and go after it. So that's a very challenging segment of the market, though.
Find your niche and win. If you can do that, that's kind of the 101 in business. Find an underserved niche and underserved market, deliver high value and profit.
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to do the group test on SIM.
Ugh, I don't want to think about it right now.
I luckily don't have to do your group tests. I don't have to think about it.
Web application control web applications with 2 clicks. Cloudflare Gateway is very much a SASE play, is what I got from it. Like basically, now you go to Cloudflare, and rather than authenticating through a traditional VPN, right? You've got a CDN network, 200 cities around the world. That's where your traffic is funneled through, and that's where you can apply security policies. Very much a SASE play from Cloudflare.
Yeah, Cloudflare has very much been playing catch up and doing it pretty quickly with the other security CDNs out there. And I remember a number of years ago, we used to call this SDP, software defined perimeter.
Yep.
This category,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was Soha that Akamai acquired a few years back, and did basically the same thing. Backhaul the traffic. So basically, if you can take your web server off the internet, there's a whole lot of attack surface gone.
Yep.
Right there. You don't need a WAF anymore. Or maybe don't need a WAF anymore, because now only the 1,500 employees that are authorized to get to it go to it. So now the only attack surface is Cloudflare's gateway, that you authenticate at. So it's a really neat idea. If you can do that with an application, take it off the internet entirely, by using this technique, that's a huge move.
Let's see. Where else do we want to go? So this is one I could not make heads or tails of. Awake's NDR platform strengthens cybersecurity across cloud, hybrid, and IoT environments. I mean, you kind of already know what you're getting into by reading the headline. And just like every paragraph I'd read it, I'm like, what are they trying to say?
What are they announcing?
What are they trying to say? Because Awake was bought by Arista Networks.
Oh, I see.
I like Awake's technology. I actually interviewed the founders early on. What I appreciated was they spent time in SOCs understanding what the problem was, came up with a solution for them, had a successful exit to Arista, but now it seems like they got caught up in their marketing engine that is not, unfortunately, not really communicating the value as clearly and concisely as they should.
I think all this announcement is hey, we've got it integrated now.
Yeah, because it is like buzzword. Zero trust is thrown in there. NDR is thrown in there. Network-based multi-domain macro segmentation. Oh,
I just read
say that
same
again.
Network-based multi-domain macro segmentation. There's 3 buzzwords that are hyphenated together. But
it doesn't end there. Macro segmentation service situational awareness for all network resources and NDR.
Yeah. Wow. Like, you can't understand what they're trying to say. And again, I think it's unfortunate because I like Awake solution. It's just been shrouded in buzzwords and marketing speak. And like, don't do that. Like, don't. Our advice on the show is like, don't do that, because again, people are going to read this and go, "Wow, that's a bunch of marketing gobbledygook." Next, when maybe that's a solution that can actually help your organization, but you're not going to glean that from this article.
There was I forget what the company did, but there was a company that I want to say they were a legal firm or something like that, and they created a word plugin called it was bull something around BS. Mm-hmm. And it would actually scan your document and make suggestions when you put buzzwords and things like that in there. Like if you put stakeholder in there, and it was very tongue in cheek. I think it was a British company, so there was all this humor baked into it. It was like stakeholder, it made some kind of like Buffy reference, vampire killer reference. And
single pane of glass.
Yeah. Why don't you use this instead? And
it would have a field day with this article.
I think you have. Grammarly actually does a really good job. I use Grammarly quite a bit here, and they catch this kind of stuff now.
Yep.
But I think Word should just crash if you have more than 3 hyphenated words in one sentence.
It should just delete your document and make you start over. It should just
kill itself. It's just like, all right, we're done here.
Grammarly is interesting though, because when we cover these articles, when I copy and paste the snippets in, Grammarly is connecting the snippet, so it's clear that like they weren't using Grammarly. If they were, they weren't paying attention to its suggestions, and it'll make changes to it. But what you see in my snippets, largely, if it's not my voice, I include it in quotes, right? And that's the quote from the. I try and pull a quote from the article that helped me understand what it was trying to say. In Awake's announcement, there was really no snippet I could pull that told me what they were doing, unfortunately. So work on that, because we want to know what you actually do. CrowdStrike is made some improvements to the Falcon platform. This is basically workflow stuff for SOCs, is basically what I got. It's PagerDuty, Slack integrations, and things like that, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but not necessarily like any kind of cool techie stuff that I saw. It was really just a workflow automation, which is important. Don't get me wrong. You have the greatest technical solution on the planet, but if no one's getting those alerts or able to, grab them and interpret them and take action, then it's completely lost. So I think it's a good announcement.
We had there's actually a conversation going on in the Discord kind of around this, where one of the folks in the Discord right now is talking about having an argument over how important it is for an MSSP to have their own proprietary tool or to basically white label somebody else's. Mm-hmm. And my response was it's a trick question. It's more about the people in the process. Like, you can make almost any tool work if you've got solid people and processes.
Yep.
And then you can look at improving that tool or maybe finding a better one. But I think the tool itself is much less important than making sure those workflows really work well, which is why I like seeing press releases like this.
Let's see. Strata Mavericks Identity Orchestrator extends Azure AD to control on-premise applications. It allows you to migrate applications to the cloud without rewriting them, so identity can be centrally managed by Azure AD. To me, that was concise. Told me exactly what the product did right there. So I like that.
We've got to do our webcast.
Yes.
On or segment on writing better press releases.
Absolutely, we do.
I just want to jump back real quick to that CrowdStrike one.
Yeah.
I spotted something in there I found was interesting. CrowdStrike, and I've heard variations on this rule from different CISOs, but I find it interesting. CrowdStrike has their own response rule which they call 1-10-60. 1 minute for security teams to detect an attack, 10 minutes to understand it, and 60 minutes to contain it. I think that's a really cool, basically, tool for them to have in working with their customers, because it's everything we're seeing here is CrowdStrike is more than just here's a tool, good luck. Like even down to the philosophy, the tactics, the strategy. They're helping their customers understand like what they should be aiming for, what maturity looks like in detection and response. And I love that they've got this.
Agreed.
It makes me happy.
Positive thing. Sonatype has an interesting new announcement talking about dependency confusion. So this is when you've got an internally written module that maybe has some namespace collision with a public open source module, and your software includes that public open source module, or someone realizes that they can create that namespace collision perhaps and inserts a malicious module instead. So it says, confusing your own proprietary software components with public components in open source registries. And they've got some newly released technology that helps you deal with that, which is certainly not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Because largely, I think we've developed this software without thinking about how these attacks have come to light, right? So I think if we had to do it all over again, maybe my proprietary modules would be named different and treated differently to prevent against this. But the problem is we've been developing software for a really long time and just haven't thought about this particular attack vector, because now it's a much more popular attack vector.
This is like the software library equivalent of when people would buy common typo domains and just set up an email server and capture emails
typo
that were set. Yeah, typo squatting. If essentially it's well understood threat, typo squatting. Just aimed at repos and libraries.
I'd be interested. I'd be interested in asking him what languages it works on within the repo. From a collision space vantage point, it's probably at least. I mean, Sonatype's the best ever at Java. That's their bread and butter, always has been. But I wonder what other languages will be supported in here. And I'm sure they're continuing to work on it, right? Just because they put a release out that might be, and I don't even know if it is, but might be language limited. I'm sure they'll continue to expand it if it is.
Yeah. Of course, a lot of the trends are in Node.js libraries today.
Yeah. They call out NPM in the release.
Yeah.
Yeah, NPM, potentially other open source repositories, PyPy, Ruby Gems, NuGet, etc.
Yep.
So I don't know if they support that, but they do mention it in the
probably working
article.
on it. Yeah, Python's probably a pretty close second in that.
Yeah,
a lot of shenanigans in both those repositories for sure. I thought this was interesting. Tufin releases vulnerability-based change automation app. So it says it addresses the problem by automatically retrieving data from an organization's vulnerability scanner and reflecting the results in the risk assessment step of an access request workflow. I kind of read that as like you want to allow access to something maybe in your VPN or SASE or in Firewall. I don't want to necessarily say, but like in your access control policies, which extend well above and beyond. But the software is telling you like, hey, you're going to expose something vulnerable to the internet or some population, right? I thought that was pretty cool.
So Tufin's like, yeah, so this WordPress server that is running 5-year-old WordPress, let me see if I got this right. You want to expose this to the internet?
Yeah. Like, you might want to know about that. Maybe not do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. And I think it's a great example of how like security teams have all this useful data, but it's only useful if it's available in the right place at the right time, to kind of advise what you're doing.
Yep.
And that can be so tough to do for a time-strapped, resource-strapped security team, with IT breathing down their neck, just trying to get things done. Or in a lot of cases, I don't think I've ever worked. I've worked mostly financial services firms, and the firewall was always handled by the network folks. So now you've got, that information needs to be shared across multiple departments.
Now it's your cloud and ops team that's dishing out those policies.
Yeah, so this is a step in the right direction.
I thought it was good. Let's see, what else do we got in here to run? Oh, Gigamon launches Hawk, partners with AWS to simplify and secure cloud adoption. I think this is remote packet capture into the cloud. It's a critical cloud visibility gap, launching Hawk, industry's first elastic visibility and analytics fabric for all data in motion across any cloud network. It's a pretty bold claim, but Gigamon's got some they've got some ninja engineers. I've interviewed at least one of them. Because they made an acquisition of a security company to make that security play.
It's like how you say, I've interviewed at least one of them. They're all ninjas.
Yeah, they're all ninjas. If they're anything like the one I interviewed, That means they're all ninjas. Okay, there's a little bit of a stretch there, but they hired a team of ninjas. I've only interviewed one of them. Yes, correct.
I was really hoping this would be a CrowdStrike competitor. That way we could have Falcon versus Hawk. But unfortunately, it's not. Opportunity missed.
So they talk about visibility as code embedded into cloud automation to elastically scale up and scale out on demand. A single
you lost me.
consumption-based licensing model operates seamlessly across any cloud, public or private. I mean, they make some bold claims in here. But then they talk about cloud visibility for network tools. They provide network tools, agentless visibility into layers 2 through 7. That was the kind of cloud packet capture thing I was hinting towards. And then network visibility for cloud tools. So like the other direction.
Yeah.
Tyler just has this perplexed look.
I guess so is this like what is the RSA tool?
NetWitness.
NetWitness. Yeah, I mean, is that what we're talking about here? You know, full packet capture analysis. And I would assume they're using the native AWS packet capture capabilities.
Yeah, similar. Extra Hop, right, has been on the show. They're a sponsor in this space as well.
Right. Just wondering if this is more of a detection and response play or more of a forensics play.
I think it's probably both. I think Gigamon realized they had access, to tap all these networks in their devices, and they want to provide some analytics around it.
Right. Yeah, I'm just curious if I've got to run like a Gigamon instance in my AWS. I'm trying to read through here, trying to find it.
It could be either or, right? You could mirror your traffic to like their cloud solution, or bring in an instance of the solution provider into your cloud instance. What I found is a lot of companies try and do both, because larger in the financial sector, kind of back to your point, Adrian, right? You don't want to necessarily have those hooks into someone else's cloud infrastructure. You want to have it all on your own. So I'm not sure what Gigamon's offering there.
They're going to put it in S3 buckets. So keep an eye out for PCAPs, large PCAPs and S3 buckets from now on.
Right. And unsecured. Yeah, make sure those S3 buckets are secured.
Definitely. Hopefully they do that automatically and they don't let you mess that up.
Did we cover all the stories? It was a lot. Whew.
It was a lot.
It was. I think we're all good though. Tyler, Adrian, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. That'll conclude this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. Thank you for listening and watching. See you next time.